who might be new. The GoToWebinar attendee interface is made up of two parts. The viewer window is where you see the presenter screen. The viewer window can be resized by clicking and dragging the lower right corner. The control panel is where you can interact with us at this end. Clicking the arrows on the Grab tab open and closes the control panel. The audio pane is where you'll find audio information. If you've joined via VoIP or Voice over IP, you'll be listening on your speakers. If you've joined via telephone, please be sure to enter your audio PIN into the telephone keypad. You can communicate with us through the questions box. Clicking the hand icon on the Grab tab raises and lowers your hand. And finally, in the View menu, uncheck Auto Hide the Control Panel if you'd like for your control panel to remain open. This webinar is being recorded, and you'll receive an email with a link to the recorded session sometime tomorrow. So no need to worry about taking notes if you have to leave us. You won't miss a thing. And now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our presenters for today, Mr. Vince Norton, Managing Partner of Norton Norris Incorporated, and Dr. Andy Beadle, Chief Online Strategist for Norton Norris. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thanks, Shannon. Happy to be here and share some relevant information and timely information, I would add, with our audience. It's good to see so many old friends, colleagues, and clients on the phone all the way from around the line here, all the way from California to the East Coast. Welcome. I'm glad you joined us, and a special shout out and welcome to some of our vendor friends who have joined us too. We're happy to have you on the call and know that you'll enjoy learning from one of the industry experts, Dr. Andy Beadle. I'll let Andy give you a little bit about his background in just a moment here, but those of you that have been around a while know I've been at this a long time. I started before I had hair, and you can see how many years that's been. You know, my work is primarily on the traditional side, and in fact, I think a little bit later this year, Andy and I will co-present on the relationship between traditional and digital media. I'll give you a little sneak preview. We've been gathering a good body of research on how those two are interrelated and attributing some of the offline traditional results to the digital world. So many of you may know us more for our shopping and admissions training products. We are very versed in traditional and digital media, and today we're going to be walking you through the digital side of things and going through some changes. And with that, I'll introduce my good friend and colleague, Andy Beadle, and have Andy give you a brief bit of background as to why he's here with us today.
Thanks, Vince. I too have been in this business of disturbing. I think I remember when you had hair. So that's been a long time. Yeah. So just to round out what we do, I think, as you said, a lot of people know Norton Norris for a wide variety of services. We do a tremendous amount of digital management, from website development to search engine management and placement work and pay-per-click advertising. I've been involved in the internet since before there were pictures on the internet. In fact, back when I was a professor, I taught one of the first 4 or 5 online courses in the country. So we've been at it for quite a while. And in terms of our digital team, we have been involved with pay-per-click advertising on the internet since DoubleClick was formed in 1996. We started working with them in 1998, and in fact, we were one of the first 350 advertisers, you know, to work as an agency when Google started AdWords. So we've been at it a long time. We have a little bit of a different view of the AdWords system just because we spend so much time with it and manage campaigns across really the 200 largest markets in the country. So we got a lot of experience, and we've seen it evolve over time. That's why when we see big changes like this, usually it's a pretty quiet word to clients about what's going to happen. But what we saw take place after the Google Summit, I/O Summit earlier this year, really about 3 weeks ago, was important enough that we thought we'd digest what we learned for the industry and put the word out.
Excellent. So as we go along today, please know that you know, you don't have to wait. You can launch a question right there in your control panel. your little pane there on the right-hand side. If it's pertinent to what we're talking about as we go, we'll stop and address it. Otherwise, we'll make sure and address it when we get to the end. So, speaking of questions, when you registered, we asked you 3, well, kind of fun and important questions. We asked you if you knew what your average page rank was. We asked you if you knew your impression share, and we also asked you if you knew who your major PPC competitors were. And those are multiple choice questions. You could tell us yes, no, or huh? What are you guys talking about? It was a little disturbing to see that 10% on average were saying, what are you talking about? So to share with you those results as we get into this today, 45% of you who are on the call with us today manage your PPC campaign in-house. I think we probably have an opinion about that, Andy, but we'll try not to share that be too much out front with that. Another 40% of you said you know your average page rank. Kudos to you. 32% of you said you know your impression share. Scary. And said you know who your major PPC competitors are. So before we even start sharing information, I'm going to be curious here, and I'm going to launch a poll and just find out from the audience, a quick little, I guess this could be called a pre-test. Maybe we can get the same poll at the end. So this is, we're broadcasting from Chicago. You can vote early and often. So you can select as many of these as you want today. And the question is, why is impression share so important? Maybe we'll tell you here in a little bit. So far, you guys are doing pretty good. But only 14% of you have voted. So find the little voting buttons. I think it's your cursor. It's your mouse. Hover over the little box and then click. You're getting better at voting. Okay. This is the interactive part.
How shocked is everybody going to be when the answer is it's impressive?
Well, that's going to be your job to convince them. All right, we've got enough participation. Sorry to those of you that I'm closing out of the polls. And let's take a look. And what do you think there, Dr. Beadle?
Well, this is excellent, and I'm really glad to see a lot of folks, I think, understand the idea of impressions. We get that from the old media idea of buying CPM, right? And I think it's great to see that people also understand that there are other ways that impression share manages, helps you manage your cost and your effectiveness on AdWords. So absolutely true. Impression share, the higher it is, the more often your ad shows. For those who don't know, impression share is the percentage of times that your ad was eligible to show and then it actually did show. So Google sort of looks at your ads and says, based on your targeting, hey, here are, say, 100 opportunities where this ad would be relevant. I'm going to show it 50 times. That would be a 50% impression share. So let's see, Vince, it looks like we're out of that. So to see people understand that your ad shows more often as higher impression share is great. In addition, it is also correct that it does drive down your cost per click if you've got highly relevant ads. On the other hand, that can be a double-edged sword because as your impression share goes up, it often means you're higher on the page. And sometimes higher impression share, in fact, oftentimes higher impression share does mean that you will increase your cost per click, but you will, as it says in the last one, increase your quality score. So for sure, C and E are right, and D is correct sometimes.
Well, thank you. All right, so now that we've found out, we had a little voting exercise, let's go back and share with you what...
And I'm going to interrupt briefly, Vince, and say the reason we asked about that was not to make anybody feel bad or make a point, but that what we're talking how to deal with these problems is going to be intimately related to how you manage your impression share in your account.
Excellent. So we'll run you through briefly here today how things used to be, talk about give you a quick little history lesson. maybe surprise some of you that anything has changed. And then we'll take a look at the world today as we know it, and give you some dialogue as to what it means, and better than that, what you need to do about it. All right, so it wasn't too long ago I pulled this screenshot. I think this was for a presentation I did last year in Florida. And since I wanted to be topical and relevant, I just Googled Jacksonville medical assistant classes and got this nice screen right here in front of you. One of the things you'll notice, the paid listings up at the top left are shaded, right? That's the way it used to be. And then there was a whole row of ads down that left-hand side. That's
right-hand side.
Thank you.
Yep.
The other left-hand side.
The other left.
On the starboard side. Today, however, things look a little bit different. And if you do that same search, you are going to see listings on the left-hand side, and you're not going to see listings on the right-hand side. I'll also draw your attention to some coloring in the left-hand ads. You know, the screen before, the left-hand ads were shaded. This screen, the shading has gone away, and they're yellow. And on this next slide, you will see one more example of how things look today. And the yellow box that says ad has changed to green. And you'll note that there's no offsetting color behind the ads as well. So now that I've explained how things are, I'm going to ask my good friend Andy to tell you really what this means.
So if you'll remember from that first page, you had the right-hand side and the top ads. That meant that there were roughly 10 ads on the area in the screen that we would call above the fold. Now, what's going to happen is it's moved down to a maximum of 4, and it means there are probably going to be between 4 and 6 ads on the entire first page. There will be the 4 ads at the top of the page. I believe ultimately there are only going to be 3, but we can talk about that later. And then you're going to see some ads at the bottom of the page, which you'll notice we didn't even screen cap because it was so far down. In addition, you'll note that when Google made this change, they kept a label on the ad that was a contrasting color with the page. Vince, if you could just go back one slide, is that possible? And now you'll notice, which they announced just a couple days ago that they're going to keep permanent, that label that says ad next to those things at the top of the page is now green. It is the same color as what they call the display URL, meaning the link, the little URL that tells people where they're going. And you'll note that that color is the same whether it's an ad or an organic search result further down the page. So what we've seen happen is the total amount of available space for an ad on page 1 has been reduced by 60%, and the ads are much harder to distinguish now from organic search results. This was piloted in a few markets earlier this year, 3 weeks ago, that they were making this change permanent. This is what all of your ads are going to look. That teeny-weeny little block does kind of set off that it's an ad, but note from a color standpoint, it's indistinguishable from regular search results. So what we're going to see is more people clicking these ads at the top, thinking that those are the results of their search, rather than scrolling down a little bit further and seeing the organic search results and clicking those. This can be a good thing. This can be a bad thing. One of the things that Google cares about is what they call searcher intent. If people are looking for something in particular, if all goes right, your ad is very relevant to their intent. However, we do find that consumers, especially in an area like education, do a good amount of what we'll call research, and that they kind of look around and kick the tires. So there's some possibility that you're going to start getting more clicks and your conversion rate is going to go down because these ads are not going to be as easy to distinguish, And searchers might become surprised when they visit your landing page and go, hey, wait a minute, this wasn't what I was looking for. So you're going to see more confusion in consumers distinguishing between ads and organic, because those ads are no longer on the right-hand side where it was obvious before, and the coloring now makes them much closer. If we move on to the next slide, I'll show you some other changes that have happened. Because there are only 3 ads or 4 ads above the fold, it means there's more competition to be in those top spots. Think about this. When is the last time you searched for something and scrolled all the way down to the bottom of page 1? It happens very, very seldom, and the ads at the bottom of the page get very, very little traffic. So what it means is we're going to have increased competition for the top 3 slots. Now, depending on how you manage your AdWords, and I think there are plenty of people on the call who have an active role in managing their PPC campaigns, there are a lot of instances where you tend to manage your AdWords for an optimized cost per conversion, right? You want it for an optimized cost per lead. There are a lot of times where you need an overall lead flow, and you manage up to an allowable maximum conversion. In the latter case, you're going to want to be in the top 2 positions on the page, because that's where the most traffic is. If you have been managing for an optimized cost per conversion, you might find that, say, your average position on the page for your ads is 1.7. What does this mean? It means half your ads appear in the top 2 slots and half appear below. If it so happens that a quarter of them appear in slot 4, and slot 4 gets bumped to the bottom of the page, or worse yet, slot 5, it means your traffic for those optimized campaigns is going to drop drastically. It also means that the 10 people who were on the front page are now competing essentially for 3 different slots. People who are in the know are already optimizing their campaigns to increase their quality score, increase the size of their ads, and get smarter about their bidding so that they can manage this increased competition and not have to spend, say, an additional 40% for every click. Want to go to the next one? So what do you need to do? Smart Money says it's a model of your allowable cost per lead by program and by market. This sounds difficult. It actually really isn't. You need to kind of get close to a kind of a target. It doesn't have to be exact, but you want to know exactly what you can afford to spend for a lead, preferably across all sources, but certainly in AdWords, and you need to determine how that's going to affect your average revenue per student and what your cost per start is. Because what's going to happen is your costs are going to go up in order to try and convert more people because of this increased competition. So you want to know the maximum amount you can spend in order to get those leads and not go upside down on your ad spend. So in order to do this, you need to know your average revenue per student. You want to know your fixed costs for the entire program in a particular location. You want to include in that some sales, general, and overhead, your compliance position, so on and so forth. You want to know your variable cost per student, how much does it cost when you come in and you're doing financial aid processing, so on and so forth. You use those numbers to know the number of students you need in order to break even. In my world, I say we add 20% to that and begin to build a model of what your lead to start ratio tells you can afford for a PPC lead. So building this model will allow you to know as you go in by program and by market how much you can spend, because you are going to need to spend more in order to maintain the amount of traffic you have.
And I'd jump in here, Andy, and remind our audience today that, if they aren't seeing their, their cost per lead, cost per inquiry, by market and by program from either their internal resource who's managing their PPC campaign or their external resources, that's really something they should be asking for, because you'll see at the end when we share some real campaign results is that if you've got an average cost per inquiry of $87, you could have inquiries that are $35, $40, and you could have others that are $250, and for some programs at $250 perfectly fine. For others you may you may not stomach that so well.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's also true that a lot of this comes down to campaign structure. We do see a lot of campaign structures where it's very hard to tease out, the cost per lead for a particular program in a particular location. But it's really a number you want to be able to get at fairly easily. Even though that number itself is something of an average across keywords, it's important, for instance, to know that, say, your trade leads are X, percent cheaper than your allied health leads. And some allied health programs, you can afford a much higher cost per lead just because of the way the revenue model works. So yeah, hugely important to be able to pull that out of your campaigns, and your PPC vendors should be able to do that fairly easily. And if they can't, you might encourage them to change that practice.
All right, good stuff. So moving on, some other things you're going to want to do.
One of the things that's going to happen is, as you compete for these top 3 slots, you're going to have to begin to purge your keyword universe a lot more, I would say, aggressively than you may have in the past. We have a lot of instances where clients will ask, an owner or leadership will sit down and say, well, I searched for, medical assistant and our ad didn't show up, but somebody else's did. Why is that? And one of the reasons is that when you look at maybe that keyword, you say, well, people are looking for jobs. Maybe they're looking for a program. Maybe they're not. In a day where you can afford a good bit of bidding on keywords that don't perform that well that often, you might go ahead and add that in even though you know it's not well optimized. But what you're going to need to do in this world is spend even more on your best performers in order to maintain a top page position. And once you've got your cost per lead model down, no matter the program, no matter the keyword, if it's over your allowable cost per lead, it's time to pause those keywords. Maybe come back later when you've got some extra budget. I think we're going to see overall, we've already begun this process with Norton Norris's client base. This announcement by Google was made 3 weeks ago. It became what I'll call firm public. They announced it at the Google I/O Summit. The change had actually rolled out nationwide programmatically by the end of that day, and then it sort of hit the major press the day after. So we started tuning client accounts about 3 days after that, and we're seeing almost a 20% drop in the active keyword universe for many clients in an effort to raise our ability to put as much as we possibly can in the keywords that are our best performers. So this does mean people might get a little more uncomfortable questions, but the rubber meets the road here when we're able to show that we're dominating those top 2 slots and bringing leads in at acceptable volume and acceptable cost per lead. Some of the other things that are going to happen, and those of you in the game may have noticed when I showed that screen cap earlier, that headlines are getting longer. Currently, the headline is that big blue line at the top that's in bold. Currently, you get a 25-character headline. Later this year, you're going to get 2 30-character headlines. And in appropriate formats, for instance, the desktop, you'll see that as a single line of text across the screen. On your mobile device, you'll see it as 2 30-character lines across your screen. And they're going to be big, bold, and bright blue. This is now going to match exactly what you get when you get the headline for a search result. This is a great thing. It means you can tell a better story, so to speak, in your prominent headlines. You can use more keywords. You can use your longer keywords in these headlines, and it means that your ads are going to take up more space on the page. In addition, they're going to move from 2 35-character description lines, which are the stuff you write underneath your display URL that says, flexible classes and financial aid for those who are qualified, veterans welcome, so on and so forth. That's going to become a single line, so you're going to have a single sentence that is an 80-character description. This is important because in the old 235-character line, in order to get those to appear side by side on larger screens, you had to make sure that they were syntactically correct as a sentence, but they also had to look good in 2 lines. So that caused a lot of the weird tortured ad copy that people in our business get good at writing. Now what you'll have is 80 characters to do a single line that'll enable you to put together a sentence that's easy to scan and read or a good set of little bullet points. There's another piece that we're a little bit puzzled about exactly how this is going to roll out, and we wanted to share this with clients because it does, and everybody else on the phone, because it's going to mean some changes maybe in how landing pages are constructed down the road. Currently, you manually enter what's called a display URL. That's that little green bit below the blue headline. And you can enter, www.myschool.edu/welding or something like that, even if that's not the actual URL that your links go to. There are a lot of cases where people create ads and they mistakenly manually enter those display URLs wrong, or they enter their linking URLs wrong. So what Google's going to do is take what they call your final URL, that's the URL for your landing page, and they're going to extract your domain from it. And then you can customize what's called the URL path. That's just the page that people go to for their lander. What does that mean? Well, it means that for all of us who may have landers, PPC landers at a site like careers.myschool.edu, it's possible that Google is not going to allow that anymore, and they're manually going to extract www.myschool.edu, and you won't be able to use that neat little careers at the front of your domain. We're not sure if this is actually going to happen, and to be honest, the reason for that is that Google is not sure exactly how they're going to implement it. They're doing it as a courtesy to customers to help reduce the number of ad mismatches that require that people do a lot of editing. So let's see, we've got a question from the audience. Why aren't we showing map results? And these days they're always between the ads and the organic, especially so if you include a city name. That's a terrific question. We're going to do a little bit of a side here. For those who are not aware, and if you are, it's the best way to see this is you get in and you search for a restaurant near you, and what you're going to see is a big, big, big map with a number of entries below it and little dots on the map. And then above that, you will often see ads if Google has determined that that's relevant to searches. Restaurants, you'll see it less so than in some other cases. So someone in the audience asked, why aren't we seeing map results? And what's interesting about that is Google shows map results on the basis of your, in the case of everyone on this call, your verified Google My Business account. And what happens there is you verify your map listings, and Google will go ahead and show it on the phone. Now, what's fascinating about this is they do not always show map results if they don't feel like there are enough relevant results. So, for instance, if somebody is searching for welding schools in Atlanta and they don't have enough relevant results, they won't always show those. If somebody's out of area but searching about the area, they won't always show map results either. If there are a number of strong competitors who all have solid Google results in there, they're going to show the map between the ads and the organic listings. This actually makes things a little bit worse because it's pushing the organic listings even further down, and it is encouraging people to directory shop on the basis of not really seeing any message or ad whatsoever. What gets truly wonky is when you look at search results on a mobile device. There's a lack of standardization in how they're presenting maps based on device size. Bigger phones are more likely to get them than smaller phones, and desktops likewise. It's just Google's determination of what you think is going on. One pretty cool thing, though, is if you were paying attention earlier this year, Google started the process of allowing ads in map results. So that's when you're going to maps.google.com. You click on somebody's listing and you see them on a map, you're going to be able to show ads there. And that's actually been rolled out in most of the major markets now. It's a little bit odd in the case of schools because there's not a lot of map shopping for schools that we're seeing in terms of behavior, but I think down the road that's going to become a more powerful method of moving budgets. So that's a terrific question. So Vince, next up.
Sorry, I was talking on mute, and it's always hard for people to hear me. And I was just mentioning a friend here in Illinois is asking if you're consistently positioned at 1.5, what percentage of your ads will be at the top, and what will be below the fold?
If you're consistently positioned at 1.5 for a particular campaign, what we see is that your ads are going to place roughly 25% of them are going to be in the top slot. You're going to probably see another 20% in slot number 2, You'll see another 20, number 3, and then the remainder of your percentage will be scattered over 4 and below. Ideally, in terms of what we like to manage, I like to see an average position of 1.4 or better. But I do recognize that that can get expensive in extremely competitive markets, but it does yield the highest traffic and the best click-through rates by and large if you've got a highly optimized keyword pool.
Cool. All right. Talk about some additional strategies, and then we'll go back to some questions. Keep the questions rolling in, and happy to loft them up here. So a few other things that we're recommending.
Yeah, and one of the things that gets really important about managing a large keyword universe, especially for schools that have multiple locations or multiple programs, is you want to have smart automation that maintains your page position in the event of a new entrant into the market. I'm sure that many of you are familiar with the thinking sensation of suddenly your ad spend, which has been the same for several months, starts being less effective because a competitor has moved into the market and begun to spend money, and now you're competing for space. Automation can help you prioritize pieces of your account and make sure that your ads are, say, automatically bumped up to a certain position within a certain cost threshold. And then what you can do is go in and start monitoring budget and have Google alert you if there are any weird outliers. It really helps when you're managing keyword universes of 20,000, 30,000 keywords across multiple campuses, because going in and looking at that stuff one at a time really becomes unwieldy and you start missing a lot of opportunities. In addition, about 2 years ago, we started doing all of our major PPC traffic and campaign modeling as an interplay between Facebook traffic and Google traffic, as well as traffic to our clients' organic websites. So one of the things that you want to do when you do this cost per lead model is begin testing budget and ad campaigns head-to-head between Facebook and Google, and figure out where your optimal daily spend is in both platforms. So it's not simply a matter of managing for cost per lead, but asking yourself, if I spent twice or 3 times as much on Facebook and my cost per lead is this much versus what I'm doing on Google, is that going to work for me? And can I begin to do retargeting from people who are visiting my organic site from Facebook back into the Google platform? So we do a lot of modeling now where rather than just look at one platform, we integrate all of them together and spread our budget and campaign approaches across all those platforms. And I think down the road this is going to get more important because the targeting in Facebook is not as fine-grained as Google's, but there's more ad space available given how people use the platform. In addition, it's really important for people to understand that the tricks that work well for SEO also work for AdWords landers. Google used to have a thing called PageRank, and that was kind of how they gave your pages a grade, and you had a rank, and that kind of said where you would show up for various search terms. And that was an opaque calculation, obvious, that nobody really understood. But it's important to understand that when AdWords was started, the method that Google used to give people what's called a quality score, meaning deciding if your ads were relevant to the searchers, was based on very similar algorithms to the ones they were using at the time in order to determine PageRank for SEO. So one of the things that we've learned is that as Google updates that SEO algorithm, we start to see changes in quality score for AdWords landers, or for the lander component of AdWords. So that means stuff that works well on your web page, which is detailed content, maps, proper name, address, and phone data, proper structuring of headers, proper use of media, video, pictures, so on and so forth, alt tagging, those things, all that kind of stuff works well and does help your quality score for AdWords landers because those things are sort of combined, believe it or not. There's another question this is a terrific question. I love this question. Is it true that the more 5-star reviews you have with Google in conjunction with good PPC ad, Google gives you a better ranking? What is true about that is that 5-star reviews at Google are a thing that you can display with your Google ads. They're called review snippets, and you can attach those to your ads, via a feed from your Google business account. And having those will increase your screen real estate and also results in a much higher click-through rate. That's just been demonstrated. So what that does is it does give you a better ranking because Google sees higher engagement through that. It is not true that Google gives you a higher ranking for having more 5-star reviews any more than they necessarily would for any other platform. It's just that having those 5-star reviews is actually a very important consumer measure that they tend to trust. So those are always good things, and what they do is they do increase the effectiveness of your campaign, and Google will reward that by giving you a higher quality score, which in fact boosts up what they call your ad rank. So that's a terrific question, great question. And I think those things are going to become even more important as people begin to compete for these higher slots on the page. Vince, do you want to take over the results stuff?
I can speak a little bit to them. We've layered in some before and after here for a couple of clients that we took over within the last couple of years, and just to demonstrate that some of the things we've talked about here, some of the strategies do in fact work. We look at year one before we got involved. There's an average cost per lead of $178. Year two, we dropped that down to $119. And then to zero in on allied health, which, in Andy's words, is many times a bloodbath, we were able to take that average cost per lead down by over $100 per lead within that specific allied health field. As we did that, the other thing that I think that's certainly worth mentioning is that we increased lead volume by 27% while we did that. And while we're always interested in a lower cost per lead, most of us in the enrollment management field are also interested in some kind of volume increase as well. So while doing all that, we increased volume by 27% while reducing spend by 13%. So good stuff all around. And Andy, if there's anything specific in that campaign that you want to share a nugget with, I'll let you speak again.
Sure, and I think part of this is just we do sometimes get pushback on the idea of there being competition for these slots on the page, as well as constructing these campaigns in a way that resembles a search engine optimization campaign. And I'll tell you that it works. Your goal is eyeballs, and the important thing is to calculate this as closely as you can, so that the increase in eyeballs, even though it might come at a greater cost per click, is done to as many people who are very, very interested as possible, so that our cost per click might go up, our budget might go up for every individual click, but overall our cost per lead is going to go down. And as we begin to winnow out the poor performing keywords and the ones that just really might intuitively make sense, we end up with a much rosier picture all the way around, and it gives us a lot of flexibility down the road.
All right, so here's another school looking at a period of really, last year to this year, comparing their average cost for all programs. Brought that one down by $70 and some change. And then when you look at the specific allied health, not as much variance there, but still a very nice decrease. But while we were doing that, look at the total lead volume. We were able to bring that up by 136%. And this particular client said, "Hey, if you can give me more of these high converting leads," we typically see AdWords leads converting to enrolls at 10 to 13%, depending on the area, depending on the skills of the admissions team and how things come in and how they're handled. So to spend, increase your spend by 39% and to have 136%, increase in volume is, absolutely commendable.
And this also speaks to the fact that you do see areas, and including this allied health thing is important because, I tell you, going from 203 to 194 is certainly not, cause to sell the house and move to the beach, but it's a situation where as you look to aggressively increase your lead volume and get more and more traffic, you are going to have to go after a pool of leads that may not yield as well as you would like. So it's something to keep in mind. Again, we're going to see this increased competition. You need to do everything you can, optimize that new headline, optimize the new description stuff to use those ads to qualify the traffic that you're getting. People click without reading. So you're going to start seeing these higher costs per click, but if you are very, very smart about how you target that stuff, you can begin to raise your lead volume at a rate that's much higher than you're going to have to raise your total expenditures.
Well, and it also goes back to the slide we had previously about, preparing that model.
Right.
I bet there's a lot of people on this call that, if they could increase their total lead volume by 136% in their AdWords accounts, they would be happy if their actually cost per lead went up, because,
Right.
these tend to be, after your organic website leads, your next best lead source for conversions is your PPC campaign.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then finally, here's another real live story of a before and after. Some decrease in their overall average, amazing decrease in a specific program, and I think this speaks to the fact that when you've got your campaign organized correctly, and if this program is really important to me, please spend some extra time on that, really focus on that. That campaign management and setup, allows you to, to do just that. And then year over year, we've got a 65% increase in lead volume on a spend that's almost 10 percentage points less, and then a paramedic lead volume of increase of 392% on a spend increase of only 33%.
In this client too is a perfect example of the way to manage a change like we're seeing from AdWords now in a tier 1 market. All of you who are in tier 1 markets, New York, Chicago, Atlanta, what have you, you know how brutal it is. You know how difficult it is to move the dial. One of the things that you can do is you can begin a campaign of expansion where you're trying to make sure you maintain those top 2 or 3 slots. And as you go through and do your review, you're going to find opportunities that say, hey, wait a minute, I haven't tapped nearly what I can get for the traffic for this particular program. I'm going to go to leadership and I'm going to ask, what would happen if I had 50% more leads here, or 100% more leads, or 300 or whatever? Is that something we can absorb and begin to winnow out our less effective campaigns for the rest of the suite of potential courses? So what we did in this case was we had some programs that, frankly, the cost per lead was too high. The ability to draw against competitors who had much larger budgets was not there, but we had an opportunity with paramedic to basically own that market. Our competition was weak and not very well structured, so we basically took them out in the space of about a year and maintained everywhere else. That's a very viable approach in a major market. And one of the things you can do with your competitors there is you can head fake them into spending money where maybe it's not optimal for them, but it is for you, or you basically just let them have the field for certain programs where you know that your cost per start is too high and that leads are going to be too expensive. So those situations are not unsolvable. We almost always find some opportunity that can really do well. And in this case, it was to hammer on this paramedic program and to then begin to change the mix of how we drew leads to their different campuses.
Perfect. So I'm going to encourage everybody to, if there's something we haven't covered off on yet, we've got a few more minutes here, and there's a few more questions coming in, but if there's something we haven't covered off on, please go ahead and type your questions. As you can tell, we don't embarrass anybody other than I might just, mention like where you're from if I happen to know you. But, we're not going to call you by name, so you're very anonymous in your question. We're happy to certainly answer your questions or speak to your topics. While you're composing those questions and finding your little question panel there on the right-hand side of your screen, let me just mention that there are some upcoming events that are certainly worth noting. Andy will be speaking in Orlando, and just boy, great time to go to Orlando, Andy. Sorry, it's your turn this year.
Yeah, really.
And then we'll also be at the Pennsylvania Convention in Harrisburg. But what I really wanted to draw your attention to is the top bar up there. Is that after you generate these inquiries, if you're seeing decreased conversion rates down the funnel, if you're wondering like, wow, how do I connect with these students? The old tools aren't working anymore. I'd encourage you to swing by and visit our 3-day Enroll Match admissions training session. It is held right here in July, and I can tell you July in Chicago is so much nicer than December when we had the last one.
It certainly is a lot more fun.
Yeah, there's Shannon to vouch for that. So please think about joining us. Send us a note. Registration information is either at nortonnorris.com as well as enrollmatch.com, and we'll be happy to get you all the information you need.
Absolutely. The more the merrier. All right, gentlemen. So, and I apologize, it seems that I got cut off there for a moment, but it looks like we've had quite a few questions roll in. So we wanted to just throw a couple of them out there for you and see what you had to say about these. The first one is, are all of these based on an online lead form, or are phone calls a click to the number in the ad counted as well?
These are all based on lead forms, and that is a fantastic question. So Vince will attest to the fact that I'm super, super stingy about counting leads. And he and I have had what I will call principled discussions for several years, because Vince knows that phone calls are worth their weight in gold, and I refuse to count them in any of our PPC results. So the numbers that you're seeing here are purely in online lead forms, and they are what I will call one guy to a pair of pants. So we include conversions as one conversion per click. And phone calls, we report on those. That's a separate number. One of the reasons for that is the invalid rate on phone calls tends to increase as you increase your rank in the page, because people just kind of search and they click on them. But they're fantastic leads, and for us, we basically just count them as extras. So they're not included in any of the figures we gave here. But terrific question.
Yeah, I would also mention that when we do tease out phone calls, it's not unusual. If you're seeing 50 form fills, form submissions, it's not unusual to see 20 or 25 phone calls, and those are worth their weight in gold.
Yeah, and that's spread across both the ad and the phone number positioning that we do on the landers. So that's not, the 25 comes from both of those and not just the form submission. So some people call even without ever seeing the landing page, they just hit the number on the ad. But we don't count them as a conversion for this.
Great, thank you so much. Here's another one. Are remarketing efforts worth it? We've had several campaigns and none of them track conversions, so it's been hard to sell the cost to management.
So remarketing is interesting. Remarketing is extremely effective for consumer purchases, and one of the reasons for that, as that has sort of kind of grown over the last few years, is that many consumer purchases are impulse buys. So that's the whole, I'm looking at shoes on Zappos and I see those sandals every day for the next week. It's great because the advertiser doesn't have to have a separate message or anything like that. In the case of the decision cycle for somebody deciding to go to school, as you know, it's a longer and more involved and more complex buying cycle, if you want to call it that, or decision matrix. And what we found for retargeting is, yes, the cost per lead is high. Frankly, it is not worth doing unless you have a different offer in place. So, for example, we have a client who we're actually spooling up a new remarketing campaign for, because they have this really nifty guide to competency-based learning that we really like, and it really puts the story out there in a great way. And it's something else we can offer to visitors. Now, we remarket. Our best results for remarketing come from people who are organic-only visitors who have not converted. So they go to the organic website, they haven't converted. We don't pull them from any other source. We occasionally remarket between Facebook visitors as a separate campaign, but only those who visit the organic website. So what our goal is to offer them something different to continue the story, get them to raise their hand and continue the relationship. That said, remarketing, people who remarket as prospects tend to convert and start at a higher rate, so absorbing a 50 to 60% higher cost per lead is worth it. If you're just telling the same old story, and I'll tell you, we've made that mistake before, you spool up a remarketing campaign and all you're doing is flushing money down the toilet. So unless you have a branding-only dedicated budget for your online ads, I really recommend that you only remarket to people when you have an additional something to give them in terms of information, ideas, or tools.
Thanks so much, Andy. That's great. Another question that we got was, will these changes affect the results you get when Siri does a web search for you?
They won't, because Siri's search engine is not as tightly coupled to, well, it's long and complicated. What is happening, though, is Apple Maps listings are starting to become more relevant to search results. So when Siri says, this is what I found on the web, it's not going to be as Google-focused in the next 6 to 8 months as we've seen in the past. And Apple Maps has become a major part of trying to make sure that when people do searches, they're going to get local results. Because if you'll know, most of the searches that Siri gets are actually for nearby services and goods. So that engine, the Siri engine, interprets most results in a way that says, I'm looking for something local. So this tip has nothing to do with Google AdWords, but I highly, highly recommend that everybody on this call go through and it is painful, the painful process of getting an Apple Maps listing correctly updated and verified. It's painful because someone at Apple has to make a phone call to your site from the phone that's going to be listed, or to the number that's going to be listed in the Maps listing. They claim that they can do extensions. That is true only depending on which type of phone system you have. So get ready for some fun. We just solidified the Apple Maps listing for a client with 2 locations, and it took 65 days. So, and that's not that we weren't working on it every day, but getting everything in order to make it all work and have all those calls get coordinated is non-trivial. But you're going to see a lot of Siri listings are going to depend on those map listings, and much more on organic results. So you shouldn't see much happen in terms of these AdWords changes for Siri.
Well, thanks so much, Andy. Vince and Andy, I want to, again, thank you for hosting this webinar and putting this information out there. I want to thank all of our attendees for joining us this afternoon and taking some time out of your day. We hope that you'll take a minute to answer a couple of questions as you exit the webinar. And, feel free to connect with us for more updates and dialogue on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And don't hesitate to reach out to us regarding what's coming up in the future. Oh, I see that I've got one more question that came in.
Thank you, Sherry.
Did you want to add that?
Only if Andy can answer this. Andy, do we see a specific volume percentage of PPC leads from return website visitors?
PPC leads from return website visitors, meaning people who first came to the organic website and then eventually converted it as PPC.
That's how I'm interpreting it. Yeah.
I think that's what we mean. It's not significant from what we can tell. I'm hedging my bet there because we have a lot of influence over how many clients set up their Google Analytics. It's not uniform by any stretch of the imagination. So to be frank with you, my off-the-cuff estimate would be that your last click, as we call it in the business, where the last click they made was on PPC, but their first click was, say, through the organic website, it's probably about 8% of your total lead traffic. And you could probably, if you've got a mature and effective social media campaign, you could tack another 7% on that. So I wouldn't call social media coming to your organic website as organic, right? Not the result of search results. It's more driven traffic. So I'd say max, you're going to see about 15%. That's going to be up or down for some programs because of the strength of the brand, because of the strength or lack thereof in their social media outreach, or just because of the saturation in their offline work. So, but indeed, it is not zero, but it's not an appreciable percentage that we've seen.
All right. Well, thank you for taking that last question, Dr. Andy. We appreciate it. And just, again, thank you for joining us, and I hope that you all have a wonderful afternoon.